Alright, guys, what's going on? It's the Eerie Lord here, and welcome back to another Walking Dead vlog. I wanted to get you guys some additional content just with my longer than usual absence, being very busy, but doing the trailer reaction the other day, but wanting to build upon that because something that I've discussed a lot, as well as the individual who is collaborating with me on this video has also mentioned. We finally have some news on the beloved Rick Grimes, and here with me to discuss is Jeff from TheWalkingDeadWorld. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to finally be able to actually talk about something with Rick. It's
I
been
know.
so long.
I remember a lot of our co-op videos in the past. We always brought this up, like, what are they doing? Like, there's no info on the movies. They're accelerating the story of the Walking Dead show, and it seems like it's not going to coincide with what's going on with Rick. Like, is he going to come back? It was all very confusing and all very up in the air. However, we did receive information at San Diego Comic Con, which was one of the first in-person Comic Cons in quite a long time, um, that there will be no more movies, no more Rick Grimes movies, which I think at this point that was just evident that just wasn't going to happen. Um, and it's going to be a limited 6 episode run with not just Rick, but also Denai Guerra, who's playing obviously the beloved Michonne. And it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be them concluding their stories, but it's only going to be, I believe it's only going to be a 6 episode run. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So yeah, so there's been some like back and forth because AMC's been kind of like on the fence. It seems like with wanting to say if it'll be a fully limited series or if it'll go on for a couple of seasons. Because I think at the panel at Comic Con they said that it would be limited and it would fully wrap up everything for the characters. But then I think it was Entertainment Weekly got confirmation that it could go on for multiple seasons. So we don't really know fully like how long it'll go, if it'll just be 6 episodes and that's the last time we ever see those two characters, or if this might be something that goes further than that. I don't really know for sure what we're looking at, but it'll start off with the 6 episodes. We know that for sure.
Yeah, that's I didn't know that additional piece. Because it's great that we have Rick back, but at the same time, I'm just wondering if 6 episodes, and this is what I've said about the current Walking Dead season, like, I've been concerned that they'll have enough time to wrap up everything with the original Walking Dead story with the Commonwealth, but also, is the CRM going to be addressed in the Commonwealth story, or is it not? Or are we just going to be getting, the Rick stuff completely separate? Like, that's the problem, because you have all these shows that are like trying to stay connected, but they're trying to exist in their own universe. But it's all connected, but like they want to like go off and do their own things on different times. There's no collective end date. Which what I really was thinking was that the Rick stuff and the Walking Dead stuff was going to coincide at the same time, and you would have like some sort of conclusion that would wrap up both. Um, but that doesn't really seem to be the case. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the question's obvious, but do you think 6 episodes is enough to address the CRM fully, what they're doing, expand upon the stuff we saw in World Beyond? Because I truly don't think it is.
I feel like when they first like announced that Rick's story was going to be continuing and that we would be getting the movies, um, we knew like basically nothing about the CRM, and we knew nothing about this sort of like larger world that existed outside of like the main story. But in the time since, they've expanded so much with not necessarily on the main show, but on World Beyond, and then they've done a little bit on Fear the Walking Dead, and they've kind of planted some seeds with Michonne going off and running into that big group. So they've kind of like filled in all these gaps that didn't exist when Rick first disappeared, that they now have to explain, and that'll be a lot to do in 6 episodes, like you said. Um, I mean, they could always do like big, huge, extended episodes that kind of have long run times and can fit more into them, but that's a lot to wrap up and kind of like give a satisfying end to both of those characters in just 6 episodes. I do think that they could go the route of giving like a sort of like a soft ending after those 6 episodes that feels satisfying, and then if the actors choose to come back and if AMC wants to make more, they could always do more episodes after that and kind of expand on the stuff they didn't really get to. But it's definitely I was shocked when I heard 6 episodes. I was thinking maybe like 8 or 10, because six is not much at all.
Yeah. No, I don't think 6 is enough to wrap it up. Because let's remember that Michonne and Rick have not even reunited yet. Like this,
Yeah.
it's two separate stories, because you have Michonne from in season 10 when she went off and joined this caravan to go find Rick, and then you've got Rick being taken by the group and being captured, and like that whole thing, like him learning the ropes of whatever the CRM is going to do with him. Is he going to just be a standing civilian there? We get pieces of information from Jadis in season 2 of World Beyond, but it's very disjointed. There's not much to go off of. So I wish there was some sort of like trailer or information that could come out of this. And will this tie into the original Walking Dead show is my other question. Like, will Rick and Michonne, if they succeed, go and try to find Judith and the rest? Like, will they try to go find their families? Will they go back and, like will these things happen? Like, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think ideally what I would like to see happen is the two of them reunite at some point during the spin-off series, and then it end with them finding their way back to Alexandria or the Commonwealth, wherever the characters are, and reuniting with Judith and RJ, because I feel like that would be such a huge missed opportunity if they don't bring the family together in some way by the end. I think everyone hoped that would happen at the end of The Walking Dead, but with just 8 episodes left, I don't see how that would happen at all. And that way they would kind of be able to tie together that family element, and then if they wanted more, they could have Rick and Michonne go off on another adventure or something and expand upon that if they wanted to do more seasons. But I do hope that in the first 6 episodes they at least have them reunite and have them at least kind of get back to the rest of their people in some way.
Yeah, I do too. I think it would be a missed opportunity to not have all of these characters reunite. And it's funny because they took pictures together. The actors did at Comic-Con, and kind of got everybody thinking about how those interactions would go. And let's not forget one big piece, and I mentioned this in my trailer breakdown video, how it seems like the final scene of each trailer seems to tease something that's coming in the future, like how the season 6 trailer teased Negan by showing Dwight. The Whisperer tease in season 9. Like I had broken it down. Like a lot of the trailers, the final scene was like this is going to be in the season, but here's we're not really going to expand upon it. The season 11 trailer for the final episodes had those like fast walker, like the walkers from the finale of season 2 of World Beyond, like that whole thing, like the basically like the evolved, like the walkers are like almost like where Eugene was like the walkers are evolving, like back when he thought the Whisperers were the walkers. So those are going to be in this very, only 8 episodes. You talk about limited episodes. I mean, only 8 for The Walking Dead, only 6 for the limited series. Like, you have like so much story to tell in like 14 total episodes between a limited series and the final season of your show that just seems like it's you're really just crunched for time, and I've even before they announced this, I was bringing this up, and I think this announcement, while it excites me and finally gives me something to like be happy and like, okay, this is finally going to start filming. They have like, what is it, fall 2023? Like, okay, I've got to wait another year and a half, but what is it going to be? Like 5 years, half a decade after Rick flew off in that freaking helicopter, we're going to get finally the story of like what happened to him. Like that's quite a damn wait. So I don't know. I don't know if they can pull off having all of these things wrap up or if they're going to rush it. Maybe some things will be explained in the Maggie Negan story, but I feel like their story is going to be their own story unless they have it, something to do with the CRM. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like I still have more questions, which was the problem before.
Yeah, I feel like I think the most ideal thing that they could do with the main show, at least, is in these next 8 episodes, is to conclude the characters that we're not going to see again. So the characters that aren't getting spinoffs, that they don't really have like any future plans for, conclude those stories. Let us kind of have closure for the main story as a whole, and then let that be like a jumping point for the spinoffs. Like, we know Maggie and Negan are going to go do their own thing. We know Daryl's going to do his own thing. We know that Rick and Michonne are going to be having their own story, and kind of let, like, if they need to come back to the main story area, like the Commonwealth and Alexandria, that they can always do that, like off screen or whatever. But there's these other stories that are going to be told, and I hope that we get like closure for, even though Daryl's story will continue, I hope we get closure with his relationships to the other characters on the main show, because we probably won't see him interact with certain characters again. So I do hope that's what they are kind of focusing on in these 8 episodes, is wrapping up things that, this will be the only opportunity to wrap up. Because like, we don't know if we'll see, Daryl and Maggie again together one day, and they obviously have a really important relationship. So hopefully in these 8 episodes, we see that wrap up before they go their own ways.
Right. Yeah, and in terms of the Commonwealth stuff, like, I feel like it's just kind of like in Civil War mode. Like, it's just kind of everything's brought to, and everything had to be escalated to a boiling point a lot faster just because of the limited time that you have. And again, like, I've always said that I thought the show would benefit from one more season just to round out. I mean, maybe just 8 more episodes. Like, give it the 16 episodes. Like, you're already doing like 11 and a half seasons. Just give it 8 more, because then that would bring you into 2023. Like, you give 16 more episodes to the show. You give the Commonwealth its due diligence. Maybe you bleed it over into the CRM stuff. If the two, I mean, I don't see how the two civilizations don't know about each other. It's always been a huge, giant question mark I've had, and I don't know if the Rick show or the final 8 episodes are going to address it. But it should be addressed. Like, again, like, you can't just have all of this exist in like little like air, like pods, like little vacuum pods where like this story happens in this pod and this story happens in this pod. Like, that's not how you're talking, like, and Gimple calls it the Walking Dead universe. It's all connected. So like, I should that's why, like, okay, it's cool that the walkers that can climb and open doors and all that weird stuff that's going on, like, it's cool that concept that was teased in World Beyond is now going to be in the main show. But like, what about the other elements? What about the other characters? What about the main civilization that seems to be perpetuating this? Is that maybe our teaser? Like, maybe those fast walkers is our teaser to the CRM kind of having a role in the main show, and then we'll get answers to it in the Rick show. Like, that's a possibility I didn't think of. Like, do you think the main show will end not like on a cliffhanger, but it'll end inconclusively, and then like it'll be like, oh, like the Rick show will have the remaining answers that you're looking for. Like, I'm not sure. Do you think that'll be something that could
Yeah,
happen?
I feel like they'll kind of do like I feel like in some ways it'll kind of feel like a season finale instead of a series finale, um, where they can kind of like close things up, but still tease like, oh, this will continue if you watch this show, or this storyline might be picked up somewhere else, even if they don't necessarily have another spinoff plan for that. It's kind of like what they did in World Beyond, where they kind of put the characters in different places where you could see those characters again, but if you didn't, it would be okay. There's other stories that could be told with the characters, but if you never saw them again, you still have the closure that you got from the main show ending. But we know that AMC is clearly invested in, as many spinoffs as possible. So I can see them setting up a bunch of like little cliffhangers where, like, hey, like you said with the variant walkers and the CRM, like throwing little bits of that into the last 8 episodes and then kind of cliffhangering it, and then, oh, you got to watch this to learn more. I can totally see them doing that, just because it's a smart business decision if you want to keep people watching your spinoffs. Which, I feel like the main show should be fully conclusive, and you shouldn't have to watch the other spinoffs if you don't want to.
Right.
But I know AMC's tricks and stuff with that, so I'm expecting a bunch of like little tiny cliffhangers that go all over the place.
Right, and that's kind of how World Beyond ended. Like, that was a limited series, and the ending that we got out of it was, I don't remember too much about the characters, but I remember some of the CRM stuff that went down in the second season, and the whole thing with Jenner in the lab in France, and now that cliffhanger's carrying over into the show. So they did a version of it with one of their other properties that's ended. So it's not crazy to think that they would do it again, but this is with your biggest product. This is the show that started it all. And now, you're going to say, oh, look for Ansel. Because we've got, 3 spinoffs? Is there, like, the Daryl show, the Negan show, the Rick show? You've got a show for practically, like, it's almost like The Walking Dead's not ending. That's why it feels weird, because it's like The Walking Dead's ending, but, like, it's continuing in so many, like, you got to go watch this show, and then you got to watch this one, and you got to watch this other one. It's like I just hope there's a direction by the end, and maybe that's what The Walking Dead ending is going to do. Like, it's going to be like, here's the direction. Like, Daryl is going to go figure out this about the CRM, and Negan and Maggie are going to go because Jeffrey Dean Morgan said that in the Comic-Con video that he and Lauren filmed, because they weren't there. They were like, oh, you're going to have to watch this season to see where our characters end up. Like, like basically like why do we go to Manhattan? Like, it's explained in these final episodes. So it's like, okay, then it's going to be explained why Daryl has his own show, why Negan and Maggie do, and then the Rick stuff is, because we've been waiting for that for a while. So it's just weird because the main show's ending, but it's like, hey, the main show's not really ending, but there's multiple shows where it's happening still. Like, it's very bizarre. It's very, very bizarre. I don't know if I've ever seen a show do something quite like this. Like, you have shows that do prequels, you have shows that do like straight up sequels, or they just continue the season, but like a show where there's multiple mini shows that like continue the story, because all of these plot elements you could fit into one show. Like the fast walkers with the kids, you could put that into The Walking Dead if you just extended the heck out of it. The Negan and Maggie stuff up in New York, you could just have that be like, the little bottle episodes. Like, you remember back in season 7 when we had like just Tara at the Oceanside for an entire episode and people hated it? You could do that with just Negan and Maggie, and then just have that be part of the main show. And then, then we cut to Rick and Michonne up in CRM land. Like, I feel like all of this could be in one show. Maybe not Fear the Walking Dead. Like, that is its own thing. Fear the Walking Dead, it's got its own characters, its own very odd plot with nuclear warheads and other stuff that I'm not as wrapped up into that show. But I don't know if you agree with me, just because it feels like they could do this if they wanted to, but they're not.
Yeah, I kind of described it. I was talking to someone, and I kind of described it as like these spin-offs almost feel like lifeboats in a way for the characters that will go on and get their own stories beyond the main show, where the main show's ending and not every single character that survives the events of the last 8 episodes is going to get a spin-off, as far as we know. There will be some characters that will probably be the very, very last time we ever see them. And, whether it be their own choice, the actor's own choice, or AMC not wanting to, tell any more of their story. But for a handful of characters, they're going to go their own way and do their own thing. And, some could go on for years. Some might just be 6 episodes and done. But it's like you said, I've never really seen like a franchise do this type of thing where after the main story ends, there's still like so much additional story planned. And I think a lot of it has to do with AMC not wanting to spend so much money on the main show, because the longer a show runs, the more they have to spend on it, whether it be paying the cast and crew, increases, or renting out certain locations. They were having to pay to use the Alexandria set for so long. So with this, they can cut down on the cast by a lot, and they're newer shows, so I guess with like the crew and stuff, they're not having to pay as much. They can negotiate different pay rates because it's not been on as long. So I think that definitely factors into it. I think if that wasn't the case, I definitely think it would have been like what you described, where they could do other seasons and just have these stories cut back and forth between one another and do it that way. But I think by splitting them off and making them their own spin-offs, it kind of gives them more freedom to be to be cheap, honestly, is the best way to describe it. But that's kind of my theory.
There's also the theory, and it's a good theory, there's also the theory of the Netflix deal, where they're doing this to get out of the Netflix deal, so then they can exclusively have all these mini shows on AMC. Like, they're trying to keep AMC Plus as like a competitive streaming service against the giants of Hulu, Disney Plus, like, there's so many streaming services now. And like, Better Call Saul is ending, which is one of their premiere shows. The Walking Dead's ending. Like, your 2 premiere shows are ending this year. So the only way they can continue their biggest universe is by having all these mini shows. Because now you have Fear the Walking Dead, Tales of the Walking Dead, the Rick show, the Daryl show, the Negan show. That's like 5 shows. It's basically like AMC still has a lot of content. It's got 5 shows, but it's all from one universe where all of these things are happening in the same universe, just in different periods of time. And I guess it's going to be an experiment to see if your audience is truly wrapped into that, because like, viewership has gone down over the years, and I don't know if because I imagine this is a business decision to chase the streaming model, and I just don't know if you're going to get that type of loyalty. Like, once The Walking Dead ends, like, do people just wait and then pour over into the other shows? Like, I know a lot of people will watch the Rick one, obviously, because he's the main guy who started the whole thing. The Walking Dead is his journey. So, like, in my mind, the main show doesn't end until his journey with Michonne ends. Wherever that happens, then when his journey ends, I'm like, okay, now The Walking Dead is officially done. Once Rick, kicks his feet up on a lawn chair, or takes a bullet, or gets bitten by a walker, or becomes a super walker, whatever fate is in store for the badass Rick Grimes, when that fate, cut to credits, like, for me, that's the end of The Walking Dead. Like, I don't even consider what this end is, because it's like, okay, you wrap up the Commonwealth. We know that the CRM is a much, 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 much bigger organization with hundreds of thousands of more soldiers spread out across the entire country. Like all the information we learned from World Beyond about just how big they are, and the fact that they can afford to slaughter an entire community just to run experimentations. Like in my mind, like that one episode set the gambit. It's like, okay, the Commonwealth does not have the power to do something like that. Like, sure, they can take over all the communities, subjugate them. Like, they've done a great job, and I've loved Lance Hornsby as a villain. I think, focusing at him being the villain rather than Pamela, because in the comics it was just too much like politic talk between Rick and Pamela. And I love what they've done in the show, making Lance like this rogue guy who's seeking his own power, and that's creating this pressure. And now it's in this situation where there's this like civil war, and Lance is rogue with his own communities and stuff. And so yeah, for me, like this isn't going to end until Rick does, and after that, like I don't know, like that's for me. It's like Rick versus the CRM, like that, like it's almost like the CRM's been in the background pulling the strings. They've been the puppet masters this whole time, and our main character from the beginning has to finally put an end to this conflict. And it makes the events of the Commonwealth stuff seem small, even though I'm really liking it. And it's annoying that those two things are at conflict with each other.
Yeah, I think it's funny how they made these big announcements at Comic-Con, and then the very next day, Marvel kind of had their big panel and made all these big announcements about the future of their cinematic universe. And it's so interesting to kind of like look at the parallels, because a lot of people argue that the Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of ended when the main Avengers were no longer part of the story, but they're announcing spin-offs like crazy. Like everyone's getting a spin-off. They have plans for the next decade of stories and shows and movies and stuff.
Yeah,
and it feels like
that's problematic when you call your movie Endgame and then say that there's more. Like how do like
yeah.
What? Yeah.
And it kind of, it feels like that's what AMC's kind of trying to model their own franchise after. And in part of it, I do really appreciate it, because that was Robert Kirkman's whole idea with The Walking Dead, was that it was the zombie story that never ends. And I do like the idea of, even if Rick dies, even if Rick is no longer part of it, that there's still people out there surviving, people that he impacted, his own children, that are still out there surviving. And I that's something that always drew me to The Walking Dead, was that it is Rick's story, but there's these stories happening around him that, impact the world. And that's kind of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has always felt like, where these stories are all happening at the same time, and sometimes they loop together, sometimes they don't. But it just made me laugh so hard once Marvel made all their announcements the day after AMC did. I was like, there's clearly a pattern happening here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're in need of some more original content, I just like, yeah. It's just like a lot of things have been concluding. Like a lot of the shows I've enjoyed, like, Better Call Saul was an example that I used. Some other shows I've watched, Ozark ended. I feel like Stranger Things season 4 was absolutely incredible. But I feel like they've only got one more season left in them to really. That was kind of like their end game. They had their Infinity War at the end of season 4. Now their end game is kind of season 5, and I just feel like a lot of these shows that have been like with us for a while, like, are starting to end. But some of them are just like, no, we can continue it. Like we've got 10 plus years, and it's like, I don't know if for Marvel I'm gonna be as invested in Kang the Conqueror than Thanos. Like Thanos for me, like, I don't know how you get bigger than Thanos. Like the dude was like a pragmatic, like, I just, not to get into Marvel, but like, I mean, like, he was just like the perfect penultimate villain you could have for that cinematic universe. And those two movies, Infinity War and Endgame, were amazing. Like, I'm not as invested in that universe, but I watched both of those, and I thought it was so incredibly well done. But I just don't know how the hell
Yeah.
you top it. I don't know. I just think it's a little overkill because it's like, oh, there's someone badder and bigger and badder, and to be fair, they are following comics too. Like, they're following the Marvel comics, just like The Walking Dead is. Although the CRM stuff is completely new. Like, once they finish the Commonwealth arc, like, that's it for comics stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's all.
And it's interesting too because Game of Thrones kind of had a presence at Comic-Con too, and they have their spin-off series coming next month. It's a prequel, and it's interesting because I've heard they have all these other spin-off series planned. Some of them are prequels, some of them are sequels. They have one focused on Jon Snow that is planned, and I'm interested to see, like, will fans want to continue with that, because it obviously didn't have great reception when it ended. And I think how The Walking Dead ends will impact how people feel about all these spinoffs, because if they have a really good ending that feels satisfying but kind of leaves you wanting more, people will want to watch some of the spinoffs. But if they just bomb the ending and it's awful, they're going to be with all these spinoffs that no one wants to watch. So that'll be kind of where it comes down to. If they nail these next 8 episodes and the finale specifically, that I think that'll impact the viewership for all the spinoffs.
That's a good point, because like, all these things start in 2023. So you have to end 2022 this fall with a pretty damn good stretch of 8 episodes to tell people that, like, that quality will be continued. And if you can't give people, like, all the stupid fuckery that the main Game of Thrones show did with their final episodes, because I'm very weary of a show that has so much story to explain but so little time to tell it in, and the problems that have happened from that. Just no show should ever repeat the Game of Thrones formula. And obviously the Walking Dead solution is spin-offs. So, like, all right, multiple shows will handle the additional story that we have that can't go into the main Walking Dead show. So it's like, okay, well, they're not going to rush the ending and make it stupid, because imagine if the main show rushed the Maggie Negan Manhattan stuff, the CRM Rick stuff, and the Commonwealth stuff all in 8 episodes. Like, can you imagine, like, the overlap?
Yeah.
Because that's basically what Game of Thrones tried to do. Like, they were like, oh yeah, we have all this story, let's shove it into these episodes and just make it, illogical.
And it's hilarious because during, I don't know if it was during the panel or if they were talking during an interview or what, but Angela Kang and Scott Gimple and Greg Nicotero were talking about Game of Thrones and how that kind of impacted how they brought the Walking Dead finale together, because they didn't want to make the same mistake that the showrunners of Game of Thrones made, where they just rushed it all and it just tanked that entire franchise because people were invested in it so heavily and they did not stick the landing at all. And Angela Kang mentioned how she did not want that for this show specifically. So I would imagine that,
she brought that up.
Shows,
I didn't know she mentioned that. Like, someone actually.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember if it was during the panel or during an interview, but she mentioned Game of Thrones specifically, and I thought that was just hilarious. They're probably so glad that show ended before Walking Dead did, so they could kind of see what not to do.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like the console wars, where Microsoft said for the Xbox One that everything was going to be online only, and PlayStation's like, no, you can do used games, and it was like, who blinks first?
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar, I guess, if you want to make that comparison. But I guess in conclusion, like, I'm excited for these. I'm just excited we have an answer. I should be grateful on the surface that we finally have an answer. That we're finally going to see Rick and Michonne back in action. And that there's going to be some resolution, that we're going to finally understand the full strength and plan of the CRM, and get some answers as to what the fuck's been going on in the background for all this time. So yeah, that's what I'm most excited for too, because it feels like ever since Rick disappeared, they've really just had to, like, dance around
what the CRM is all about. Like even on World Beyond, which was focused on the CRM, it felt like they were dancing around, like giving us full answers about things, even things that didn't necessarily relate to Rick. It felt like they had to dance around it because they didn't want to give too much away. And I think that's because it took so long for them to be able to continue Rick's story that they kind of almost had to stall everything. So I hope that at the very least we find out what the CRM is doing, what they're all about, and give some like actual hard answers during this spin-off show. Because I mean, we've been waiting years since that first helicopter flew across the screen.
13 years. 13 years. It's since what? I mean, I don't know if Gimple is claiming that was the CRM all the way back then, but that's how far ago it was teased. So, and I started watching The Walking Dead in fall of 2013. So this is a 10-year anniversary for me in fall 2023 to get the Rick spinoff show. So it's fate.
Yeah.
It's fate. And honestly, for people, I had some fans that, and it was surprising, I had some fans that were actually reaching out to me after all this time. Hadn't made a vlog since April, and some people were sad when I announced that I was, thinking at the time, like, of closing up the channel and stuff. But honestly, like, I might not be as frequent with making the channel stuff, and I'll probably make a separate vlog to talk about this, but, like, I would come back to make reviews for the Rick stuff. I've been waiting so long, and I feel like it's like, yeah, I'll come back and talk about, the Rick Grimes stuff. Like, I feel like that's a no-brainer. I might not have vlogs every week, but, like, when it finally comes out, like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't see why not. Like, the channel's not going anywhere, so that's kind of, I was thinking about that. Like, I was seeing some comments, and I didn't expect comments in reaction to what I said, and I was like, okay, like, I guess there's still some fans out there listening to my stuff and whatnot. And, I knew there were, like, I get, there's a good chunk of people that, like, like and comment still. But I know I'm inconsistent with uploading, so I just didn't expect that. But, like, yeah, like, I'm sticking with this universe. Like, I've been in it for this long, and I think we've said this before. We've been in it for the long stretch. Like, there's no reason not to stay with it,
It feels like Rick coming back is almost like, it's like the fan base is healing a little bit because, obviously people, and for good reason, people dropped the show when Rick left or at other points. And, I mean, this is a huge investment to watch this show, watch the other shows. And to finally have him coming back, it feels like he was like the last puzzle piece that was missing. And he's like finally coming back. And it's like, okay, some of the people that left are finally being able to, see, oh, we're going to get some closure at least, so we'll come back. And it just feels like, I mean, there's so many people that stopped watching for various reasons, but it feels like a lot of people did stop watching because Rick left. And this is kind of the opportunity for, the kind of like that first part of the Walking Dead universe to come to an end. It's obviously going to continue in a variety of different ways without their original characters. But for the people who were invested, at the very beginning, this will be kind of like the end. And I think that's important because, they could keep dangling it forever, but I'm just glad we're going to get some sort of conclusion for Rick and Michonne.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of long-standing, that's stretching back to the beginning. There's a lot of nostalgia for people with Rick, and I think your point about the fan base healing, that's absolutely true. People, I feel like they will come back, and that's what AMC's banking on, and they're kind of making it the bookend so that people can start investing in their other series first, and then you've got Rick along the way. So some strategic marketing on the part of AMC, but again, like, I want to see how they pull it off, and it's all very. I mean, this season 11's been amazing. Other than maybe some filler with the Reaper stuff, like I've thoroughly enjoyed like what Angela Kang's work, and I think they understand their formula a little bit better, and I just, I think even World Beyond had a lot of parts to appreciate about it. Like, there was some things that people found boring with the kids, but I think that there was a lot to appreciate about that show too. So, especially the second season, it really ramped up the CRM stuff, and I think that's when people really started getting interested in it. When having Jadis on the show too, that was really cool. And I imagine Jadis is going to be in the limited series. It would be kind of silly for her not to be. I mean, she is the one flying off with Rick, so obviously.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they want to cover the time that we don't have accounted for, where Rick and Jadis flew up on the helicopter, or if they'll skip ahead, because it's been years and years, and we got some pretty decent closure with Jadis, seeing where she eventually ended up. But it'll be interesting to see, like, if they weave back in time to when the helicopter first took off, if they'll show us on the current timeline. But I would imagine that Jadis has to be at least a small part of that story, even if they fully jump to the present time, because she was seen at the end of World Beyond taking on a huge role within the CRM. So she's kind of become one of the big villains of the whole franchise, which is really interesting to think about. So I do hope that they weave her back into it in some way, and have Rick and Michonne like face off against her.
Yeah, I mean, seeing as how she had kind of a villain role attributed to her in World Beyond, but they could go in any number of directions. I have to imagine it's their experimentation, a continuation of what World Beyond was doing. It's got to be these fast walker things. So I think that's it. Like, Rick is just going to be looped into like the larger plan of what they're doing, and maybe it's going to be like, join us or we'll destroy you kind of thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So awesome. Well, this was cool to do after a while. There's a lot to be excited about, but not that I'm being skeptical of some of the points that I made, but I want them to pull it off. I want the greater story to make sense. I just, having to like watch a series and then wait and then watch a series and then wait. It's like, I understand for normal TV, you have seasons where it's like, oh, we watched the season. Now we got to wait a little bit for it to come back. Like, but this is a little different, where it's just kind of jumbled throughout a whole bunch of different TV shows. So I'm hoping this formula pays off for them in the end.
Yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for too. Just, it's like a hesitancy because we don't know how it's going to work necessarily until the main show ends, but they've definitely got a lot planned, and it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, I plan to cover the Rick stuff, and maybe even do a reaction video if I'm not too, busy by then, and if I still feel up for it and stuff. And I think for me, I just do this out of my enjoyment. I used to kind of run YouTube a little bit as a side business back in college when the Google CPM rates were a little better, but for now it's just a little side hobby. And I think that was a good reminder the other day during my channel trailer that like there's a lot of cool stuff coming up, and there's people who are interested in it, and let's keep continuing the fight. And it was a good Comic-Con though. I mean, first in-person Comic-Con in a bit because of COVID, but it was a good one. So I gotta hand it to them. So a lot of cool information, and I'm looking forward to it overall. So
definitely, same here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to Jeff, The Walking Dead World, for joining me for another one of these vlogs. Always a pleasure. And whenever there's some big old news that drops, or maybe I imagine I want to do one of these again for when the main Walking Dead show ends later this fall, because I'm probably gonna have a lot of thoughts. However it ends, I'm gonna have a lot of thoughts. So so that's a big one that I'm eyeing for a collaboration. So
definitely, that'll be a good way to kind of look back on the series and kind of see where things are going from there, because we'll have a better picture of what everything's looking like at that point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to all the fans for watching. If you stuck with us this long. And feel free to leave your comments and theories in the comments below. Peace out, guys.